Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to the very first episode of Season 4. My name's Satsunami and joining me for Mortal Podcasting is none other than the flawless victory himself, Craigy C. Craigy C, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, how are you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm not bad at all. Just finished, literally in the last 5 minutes, watching Mortal Kombat, so I'm ready to chat.
Was it everything you hoped for and more?
Sure.
Yeah, for the fans. For the fans alone. So, speaking of fans, this particular topic that we're about to talk about was submitted by none other than our very own patron, Sonia, who actually asked us if we could do an episode on Mortal Kombat. So, you and I went back and forth. I was saying, have you played a Mortal Kombat game? You said, have you? And yeah, we came to the conclusion that the one piece of media in the Mortal Kombat universe that we both have consumed twice at this point is none other than the Mortal Kombat film of 1995. But before we go into that, before we start divulging our love for this film, I tried choking that back. What is your experience with this franchise?
So in terms of Mortal Kombat, I've played a few of the games, but I'm not much of an expert. What I am an expert in, however, is terrible video game movies. And this movie is the third in the holy trilogy of 1993's Super Mario Bros. Movie, 1994 Street Fighter movie, and 1995 Mortal Kombat movie. So really, it's such a jam-packed 3 years that they managed to get all those films out in 3 years in a row. And there's no more movies after that for a long time, video game movies, because they went, no, we're not doing this again. So I'm an expert in this. What about you? What's your expertise in Mortal Kombat?
So I was just going to say, what you're saying is this is indeed the father, son, and holy shit of video game films.
Not in those exact words, but yeah, we're getting it.
Not in those exact words, but similar. But yeah, for me, Mortal Kombat is one of those franchises that I know about. You know, I grew up knowing about Mortal Kombat. You always heard flawless victory and, you know, the memes that came out of it throughout the years. But other than playing maybe a couple of the games and very much similar games that either copied it or drew inspiration, let's be nice, I haven't really played much of them. I know the characters. What I will say is, out of all of, and I know you'll probably be more of an authority than I am to speak on this, but Mortal Kombat seems to be one of those games that definitely is just so iconic in the fighting genre of video games. You've got your Scorpion, your Sub-Zero, you've got so many characters that you can think of off the top of your head when you discuss this franchise, can't you?
Honestly, I think this film's like a big part of that, but the soundtrack being like the banging soundtrack that is, and that being related to the games helps as well. It is one of the most iconic. There's a lot of other, obviously, fighting games, but it's one that never goes away. I think a lot of that is, like you said, the fatalities, the colourful characters and stuff. It will probably live on way longer than us, if I'm being totally honest at this point.
Well, how does it feel to be outlived by Johnny Cage?
It's an absolute privilege.
It's a friendship finish, of course. It's definitely one of those series that it's solidified its place, I think it's safe to say, in the video game landscape. But as you said before, there was the quote-unquote holy trinity of bad video game films, and it all started, as you said, in 1993 with the very infamous, or famous, depending on how you look at it, Super Mario Brothers film, and we all know how that went. But then the year after, we of course got the Street Fighter film, and then in 1995 someone said, yeah, let's try Mortal Kombat. And it's such a weird one to go for. See, out of all the video game properties back then, you know, in the 90s that were popular, can you see any reason why they went for Mortal Kombat out of all of them?
To be fair, it was pretty popular, and like you got to think back to like the arcades and stuff. That was still quite big when that came out. And I think it was still quite controversial. What I don't so much understand, I guess, is like why they made it a 15, why they didn't make it as gory. I know they didn't really want to like appeal to kids and stuff. But you had the Terminator movies had children's toys associated. We've chatted about this before the podcast. Everyone knows that films that are 18 get shown to kids anyway, so they should have just went with it. So yeah, I think they wanted to do something like the game's quite popular at the time. It was just so controversial that I think they just wanted to try tap into that. And I think that's like why it looks so different, it sounds so different, as they were trying to get that kind of counterculture part out of it. They didn't go far enough, I don't think.
Do you think as well it was rooted in that mentality back then of video games being for kids? Because that was like a very prevalent thing in the 90s. It seems very weird how, as you said, this was a very controversial game at the time. It wasn't a game that you would have been playing round at your granny's, or you would have, well, unless your gran was into Mortal Kombat, but you know, you wouldn't be playing this in front of your parents back then. So why they chose it as a, not family friendly, that's the wrong word, but you know, as more of a teenager film. I mean, there is that case as well. Trust me, not to bring Sonic into everything, but it was that idea, as you said, it was very much counter-cultural, wasn't it? That you had characters at the very lukewarm end. You had Sonic against Mario, and then you had people who were pushing the boundaries more and more with these video games to see how much they could get away with. So to choose something like Mortal Kombat and then make it more accessible to teenagers, I mean, I can see why. It seems like a weird choice, but I can see why they probably would have wanted to do it. That, of course, being money. But I actually wonder if there was Happy Meal toys for this.
Oh, there definitely. You know what? I'm going to Google this. Undoubtedly, there was at least children's toys, if not Happy Meal toys. Yep, there was toys.
Oh, of course there were.
Some of these look great.
Really? Is that you just clicking add to basket?
Yeah. Oh, we did another big night on eBay tonight.
That one seller you buy from was just like, oh my god, I can't go get the big bags.
It's that one seller I buy from whose kids have been put through private school because of me.
Surprisingly, Johnny Cage is the college maker, as it were. But yeah, going back to the film itself, this was a film that you and I first saw together a good couple of years ago, and as you said, it was during a time where you were hosting a night to watch bad films with myself and a couple other mutual friends, and I have to say this wasn't the worst one out of all the films we watched.
No, this one though, it kind of fell in that unhappy medium, which is I couldn't remember any of it, which I think is a pretty damning curse for most films when we do these terrible movie nights, because you're either completely forgotten, you're either so bad that people bring you up years later about, Craig, why did you expose me to this? Like, you're talking Star Wars. You go on the other side, which is you become so terrible you're memorable, like a Samurai Cop. So this film being somewhere in the middle isn't a great sign for it.
Yeah, because I have to admit, there was some bits I remembered vividly, but then other bits I was just like, no. I was like, I have no idea how I didn't remember that. And there's a lot of, I mean, very meme-worthy content in this film, but very quote-unquote iconic, I want to say, scenes. You know, you've got one person literally looking down the camera, yelling, "Your soul is mine!" And I was like, how have I forgotten that? You're completely right, though. But say you're rewatching it, though, did you think it was as forgettable watching it a second time?
Yes and no. I'm surprised I forgot so much in the same vein that you were saying, because, like, in particular, Goro looked so ridiculous that I'm surprised I forgot about him. But on the other hand, we can go into some more detail later, but the fight scenes were so generic and kind of all just plugged together. Even not long after watching the film, they're all kind of like already starting to glue together in my mind that I'm struggling to pick out the different fight scenes. So I think that kind of thing probably hurt a lot more than the remembrance factor.
Because I have to say, some of the actors in this, and especially for Raiden, I completely forgot it was Christopher Lambert that played him. The Highlander himself. I was sitting there thinking, why does he look familiar? And then all of a sudden, he did that stupid laugh that he does. And I was like, oh my god, it's the Highlander. I mean, was that a trait of Raiden? Any Mortal Kombat fans, please, for the love of God, put my mind to ease by saying, oh yeah, Raiden was like, because I don't know why. I feel as if it's just that way when actors method actor, they say, this is what I think the character would do. Please, for the love of God, stop adding your own fan fiction into this film. But I mean, speaking of fan fiction, of all people, I did not realise that Steven Spielberg was meant to be in this film.
Yeah, that was a very odd one.
Because I remember watching that scene and I thought, wow, that guy looks oddly like Steven Spielberg. I wonder if it's a coincidence. And for anyone who doesn't know, it turns out that he was supposed to be in the film just as a brief cameo, but because of scheduling conflicts, he was forced to back out of it. So that is a bit of a shame, because apparently he's a massive Mortal Kombat fan, which I also didn't know. I think that's pretty cool, but did not know that about him whatsoever. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person to be a Mortal Kombat fan, if I'm honest.
Well, that was one of the things that kind of baffled me. I looked in the IMDb list of facts, as you like to do, and one of the things that kind of struck me is there's multiple stories of people really, really wanting to be involved in this film. So, like, they had that one, apparently Tom Cruise turned up on set one day and he got kicked out. The woman that played Sonia Blade wanted to do the film and got cast in something else, and then thankfully it got delayed and she was like right back into it and all this. And it's like, why were people so excited to do this film that ended up being so bad? What was Anyway, I think it just goes to show you asking the question of why Mortal Kombat. Well, apparently everybody on the planet was hyped for it.
Well, that's the thing though, because going back to what we were saying before, video game films were a relatively new frontier in terms of filmmaking. You know, you only had the Super Mario Brothers film, which I guess bombed, or not bombed, but it technically didn't do well for obvious reasons. You had Street Fighter, which again they thought, oh god, this is even worse. Then we got this, and people must have been really excited, because obviously you and I were far, far too young to even remember this. We were alive, but that was, it would have been not even in the back of our minds. But yeah, people must have been really hyped, because I had a look at what other people were saying about this film, and there seems to be a lot of nostalgia behind this film, which I find really nice. People going to the cinema to see it, or, seeing it with friends, with family, and having that experience with them, which I thought was really, really cool. But what I found really weird, and I don't know if you read up on this as well, but 2 years later, the sequel for this film came out, and that was the one that everybody seemed to be ashamed of.
I didn't know there was a sequel.
Really?
Until just I kind of came across it by just scrolling and stuff, because I think that's just how little it's spoken about though, in terms of the general discourse. I actually was kind of surprised when I saw there was a sequel.
It's really surprising, because I think even the actor who played Liu Kang, Robert Shaw, he openly says he hated the film. All of them, everyone who worked on it, do not have a good thing to say about the film. They're all like, this is a terrible film, I'm ashamed of doing it. They didn't even get Christopher Lambert back for Raiden, but apparently they gave him a script for a potential third film and they just immediately rejected it and said no. Imagine that, the Highlander saying, nah, this is a step too far. And he's been in Highlander too. I just wanted to point that out.
I was going to say, yeah, he's been in his fair. He's got no justification for being above any script.
Think about that tonight, lovely listeners. Think about that. That your life could be bad, but it's not as bad as Christopher Lambert rejecting your script. Yeah, that was surprising to me, because again, I haven't really watched the sequel. Just for the purposes of this review, I had a flick through it. It's really bad. I just kept flicking through and I was like, okay, this is absolutely terrible, even compared to this one, because for this one's an oddity. I'm just going to say it's like a weird capsule of good ideas and faithful homages, which I'm really surprised at, because that is the problem with video game films of this time, and especially towards the early 2000s as well, where they say, okay, how do we get this video game film to blend in with the real world, or how do we get it to, be more realistic? And they try to bend the story so much that it becomes something completely different, like the Mario Brothers film. But in this one, they don't care, do they? They just say, yeah, let's fight a four-armed demon prince called Goro. Let's go.
See, I have no problem with that, either side of the argument, because I think I always say to be like, your video game's still going to be there at the end of the day. So, I don't mind them changing stuff, and obviously, they changed a lot of stuff in this film, like Scorpion and Sub-Zero, were just completely made to be non-characters and allies and stuff like that. But it's like, at the end of the day, the game's still there. I always think it's a funny thing that people get hung up on. I'm not a big minded in those kind of things.
I have to say, though, I am surprised that they stuck so close to the games for this film. But at the same time, you're completely right. It is good when they do try something else on the one hand, but I guess when they stray too far and it's not successful, they're not appeasing either the fans or the new audience that they're trying to reel in. But with this film, it seems as if a lot of Mortal Kombat fans aren't as angry at this film, and I don't know if it's because of the sequel. That's what I'm genuinely wondering.
I think nostalgia also just plays a lot into these as well. Like Star Wars fans, they might be the best example of that. Like everyone hated the prequels when they came out, and then over time people grow to love them. And I think it's the same with any kind of thing. Like same with the Super Mario movie. Actually, and Street Fighter and Go Free. Like as nostalgia's increased for them, fans are a lot more forgiving of these things. And I think we'll see that with every film franchise. As they get older, and people are a lot more forgiving on nostalgia things. Just as another example, we watched for the Wolf of West East, we did the bad movies. We watched the Pokemon movie, and that was terrible. It was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I thought it was a terrible film.
Can I just point out that I was the only person there that night?
You can. We watched the Pokemon film, and it was terrible. It hurts to say that because, like, that nostalgia blinds you to it. Even if it is a terrible film, if you love that franchise, you will love that film over time. You know what I mean?
Oh no, absolutely. It's like a mice and men moment, isn't it? When you go to watch a film that you loved growing up, and then you realise it's terrible, and you have to admit it, so you have to take it out to the bike sheds and just...
I don't think that's mice and men. That's old yellow.
You mean to say that George and Lenny didn't watch Mortal Kombat?
Don't worry about it. Way too much to unpack here. Your metaphor was so wrong in so many directions.
That actually brings me to a good segue.
Oh my god, how?
Tell me about the Mortal Kombat, Craigy C.
So there's 3 mortals who are all going to get into combat with people I assume are also mortals, but they don't make that clear for Goro's path. And there's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of people fighting in very flat, boring environments, which I guess is kind of similar to fighting games, so fair play actually on that one. This is coming to someone that loves Tekken, by the way, so before anyone gets up on that one, I love the Tekken games, and they're the most guilty of it. Like, no matter where they're fighting in the universe, it always happens to be a 20 foot by 20 foot space that they've got. Yeah, so Johnny Cage, Lou, and Sonia, they fight a whole bunch of people in a row in a tournament that makes no sense to me, and they win at the end of the day. And that's kind of the film. Oh, and then the Emperor shows up at the end, and he's voiced by Frank Welker, who is the voice of Megatron. Do you have anything to add to my synopsis of the plot?
No. Actually, you're completely right, because it's something I never really thought about until you said, I wonder what the bracket of this tournament looks like, because none of it makes sense. As you said, one person wins one fight, one person wins like 3, it's all over the place, and then all of a sudden they end up fighting the main bad guy anyway, even though they're told, oh, you can't fight him, he's too powerful, even though he essentially just drop kicks him like he did for everyone else, and they're like, oh, okay. So do they have tournament makers in that world?
If they do, because Goro fought at least 20 people, so he qualified for his own bracket. I don't know what the format is, but then they just end the tournament early because there's 3 goodies left and no bad guys left, but then there's all like the guys that walk about, all the mooks. I don't know if they're in the tournament or not, that's not very clear. Some of them get involved in fights. Yeah, there's a lot of plot. My favourite thing I think of the plot is Sonya Blade. She has like her own little story about getting revenge on this guy, and her plot gets wrapped up 45 minutes into the film. It's like, no, you're done. Back to being a damsel in distress. You got action part of the film, you're done with it. That's her only fight until right at the end.
Oh, you can definitely tell that this was a 90s film though, yep, with the way they treat her character. Because she goes from being in combat gear, as you do, and then her outfits get progressively skimpier, I want to say. Like, I mean, it's not overly bad when she's in the tournament. She's got the shorts and everything. But then, as you said, after she wins that fight and she wraps up her arc with, I don't know, the guy with the cyborg guy, I'm going to piss off a lot of Mortal Kombat fans.
I think he's called Kano or Kano.
Kano do it? No, he Kano. Yeah, then, as you said, she gets kidnapped by the main big bad, and then she gets chained up, and there's this like really weird scene at the end where she's chained up and she's in a dress and she's like, oh, my friends are gonna save me when they get here. And they pull down the hood like something out of Naked Gun. They're like, we're already here.
Right, I need to talk about that scene because something else caught my eye and I couldn't stop watching it. There's an extra, right, in that scene who either messed up a take before or was just really upset because at the very first bit of that, they're all they're all sort of walking down these stairs and they've all got their hoods up and they're all kind of bowed head. But there's one extra whose head is bowed at like 90 degrees. And I don't know if it's because they couldn't see or they were scared of tripping over the rope or something went wrong. But that extra was like, I couldn't keep my eyes off them because I was so sure they were going to fall because they were like looking so nervous. It's hard to explain, like, without you have to look out for them because it's just this one extra who's like, no, I'm not falling today. I'm not falling today.
I mean, maybe it was just looking out for the big spike floor that they had installed.
Which Sonia then, at the end of the film, she gets a dress. She also loses her shoes, which I don't know why that was in it. But she then runs across the spiked floor in her bare feet. It's like, that's just so dangerous. You've just seen someone die on that floor. Don't be running across that in your bare feet. That's icky.
Yeah, I mean, that's just health and safety 101 right there.
If you've got an open wound on that.
I mean, between that and Johnny Cage not washing his hands after he punched a demon prince in the balls, I mean,
no one washed their hands in that whole fight. Did you see a sink in that film?
So this is something that I brought up to you before we started recording, that one of the things I was surprised at was this was filmed in Thailand, which obviously that's not the surprising thing. What the surprising thing is the fact that they did it in such a remote area that they had to ferry people out on a boat. And I'm thinking, why did they do it in such a remote area? Like, obviously it must have been easier for them to film and things, but can you imagine being so ashamed of your film?
Yeah, I think they were just trying to avoid health and safety because they hadn't got any sinks installed.
Speaking of people messing up, I genuinely don't know whether this was intentional or not, but there's a scene where Johnny Cage has got all his bags and he just like face plants, but then later on he's climbing up the stairs and he just lets them drop, and I am convinced that the actor dropped them by accident. Either that or it's just very convincing the way he does it, but they all just drop down and there's this weird voiceover that they've had to do to be like, oh no, my bags, oh no, and they just forgets about his bag.
And the CGI, the bag rolling down the hill as well, because he's in the camera.
But that's the thing, seeing that world, does that mean that all his clothes and things are there? Is there a demon rocking up looking like Johnny Cage?
I'm trying not to think too hard about any of this, man, because I'm going to be real with you, because when you start getting bogged down into why did these people not bring a suitcase, he's getting made fun of in the film for being prepared. But honestly, man, see when I go on holiday, see if I'm away for I can't remember if I mentioned this in the travel episode now. See when I'm away for 7 days, I bring 14 pairs of pants because I crap myself twice a day, man. I don't blame him. And everyone else is rocking up with nothing packed. Lads, what if one of the rounds of Mortal Kombat's like a swimming contest? You've not got something to get changed into. He's getting made fun of, but he's absolutely correct and everyone else is wrong.
I'm just thinking now of you're the main villain, Shang Tsung, just being like, your suitcase is mine. It's just like, no, that's where my 14 pairs of pants are.
It baffles me that he's getting made fun of for actually thinking about the tournament. Consider this situation, right? You don't pack, okay? You enter Mortal Kombat, you win, and then you save the entire world, right? And you get presented in front of, I don't know, at the end of this movie it's like Shaolin monks, but you can put your own, whatever you want to get presented to the world. But the night before, during the banquet, you spilled some sauce on your shirt, right? So you just got this big saucy stain on your shirt the entire tournament. And then when you get presented, well done, Satsu saved the world, but also, by the way, that shirt of his is disgusting. You'd want to change of clothes.
See, speaking of food, can I just go off on a
No,
tangent?
I want you to answer this guy. I want you to agree with me on this.
No, I totally agree. I would imagine the smell. I'm gonna say, imagine the honking smell. You're standing beside the guy who saved the world, and you're like, Jesus Christ, but there are no showers around it. I mean, there's a lake. You just go there.
You haven't packed any clothes. You haven't packed a towel. Again, Johnny Cage probably packed a couple of towels in those suitcases. Smartest man in Mortal Kombat.
One for everyone. But sorry, can I just go back to, speaking of both food and disgusting for a second here, see the scene where Sonia's nemesis, as it were, his eating scene? Why did that food look so disgusting? I kept looking at it and I kept thinking, is that fake meat or is it real meat?
I was trying to figure out what meat it was supposed to be.
I know it was supposed to be like chicken or turkey or something, but I don't...
pink.
It was under
It was raw.
It was raw. Because it looked so rubbery, greasy, and he was biting into it. And I thought, all right, okay, he's not supposed to be eating it, if that makes sense. You know, oh, he's pretending to eat. But then bits come off it, and I'm like, no, he's clearly taking bites off of it. What is that? What meat is that? It just looked disgusting.
I don't have anything to add on that. That's great, yeah. it was minging, yeah. This entire place seemed like a nightmare, honestly. So we've established no sinks or really any running water. Everyone's wearing the one pair of clothes.
One pair of pants.
Yeah, one pair of pants. They're having to do the thing where we swap it around direction every day. And then the food's all disgusting as well. Like, this seemed like a nightmare. And also, I know, the whole Mortal Kombat side. I'd be happy to die at that point.
I mean, it's a Russian roulette for shitting yourself. I know we joke about it when we go on holiday, but it's like, this is the true Mortal Kombat. Don't eat the pink meat and don't shit yourself.
It's my round of the tournament. I just can't make it out because I'm too busy throwing up.
You can have my soul. Yeah,
let it end.
I mean, would he even take your soul at that point, or would he just be like, nah, you're good? I don't want that shitty soul. It deters bears and soul taker. Speaking of shitty things, will we talk about the choreography?
Yes, let's talk about the choreography.
Yeah, you brought up something very interesting, so I'll hand it over to you.
This film has pretty shitty choreography, I guess is the analysis here. There's so many fight scenes in this film that the choreography being fine is terrible. You know what I mean? It's okay choreography, and that makes it bad. And it is difficult to criticise it too much because it's the 90s, and I feel like there's kind of a couple of moments in history after the 90s, like obviously the growth of UFC, and then I guess the Raid, films like that becoming more mainstream, where you have maybe like Daredevil, I guess, as well. Those kind of like things where it's like these TV shows and films having these ridiculous fight scenes, and I bring up UFC because then that brought like a more realistic fighting to the public as well. So it's kind of hard to critique films in the 90s with bad choreography. But just to sum it up, there's a point near the end of the film where Princess Katana is talking about what Liu Kang's going to fight in the tower, and she goes, oh, you have 3 fights, and I'm sitting like, oh my god, I can't watch another 3 fights. And then I realised it was a metaphor. I was like, oh my god, thank god, because I can't deal with 3 more fight scenes in this movie, because I don't think any of them were inherently bad, but they were so forgettable, and really the only one that sticks out in my head at all is the Johnny Cage Scorpion fight, because at least that had environments that they used. The environments in this one were very boring, like I was mentioning about the joke at the fighting game earlier. But the other thing I think made it quite boring is none of the fights had like objectives. So I guess what I mean by that is you can either, every fight scene in a good movie will have an objective, whether that is when the fight will kill the person, whether that's the person is injured so they're going to go after the injury, whether it's the good guys injured so they're going to protect themselves. It could be something totally different, like one character has to get to a certain location by time. Like I'm thinking of like Captain America Winter Soldier fight in that film where he's trying to turn off a button and a fight at the same time. You know, those kind of things. Every fight in this was 2 people standing across from each other, they punch a lot, they kick a lot, and then someone wins. And that was the entirety of this film. And again, that's fine for 1 or 2 fights, but see when it was like there was so many fight scenes in this film that I just gave up on it. I was so tuned out by the end. What did you think of the choreography?
I wouldn't even say it was serviceable. Like, it was, as you said, it was okay. You know that way where it's like, okay, we need a punch in this scene. They gave a punch. Oh, we need a kick in this scene. They gave a kick. But it wasn't anything that I would go running back to anyone and be like, oh my god, did you see that fight scene? Or, oh, did you see this kick or whatever? It's definitely very underwhelming, especially for a Mortal Kombat film. And I was saying this to you as well before we started recording, that I checked out, just out of curiosity, a little bit of the 2021 film of Mortal Kombat. And I was so shocked. It's like night and day, obviously, the difference between the choreography in that film versus the 1995 one. It's absolutely surreal how different it is. And I know it's because, again, it's a 90s video game film. It's a film that people probably thought, okay, let's get a quick buck out of this and everything. But it's weird as well, considering that there's so many references and kind of in-jokes and things like that for the film itself, but then to drop the ball when it came to the action, because you're completely right. If you look at films like The Raid, where, let's face it, the story's not great, it's pretty average, all things considered, but it's one of the best action films of all time, and the reason behind that is because of just how amazing the action is. The choreography's fantastic, it never keeps you bored, if that makes sense. It never leaves you bored. It always keeps you entertained. It keeps keeps you engaged. Whereas, as you said, with this, it just plodded along. And I mean, there's some very nonsensical moments. Not even the ball punching of a demon prince, that's just typical 90s comedy, quote unquote. But I mean, there was even a scene where Sonia, this is one we haven't brought up actually, she finishes her fight and she snaps a guy's neck with her calves.
Yeah, I have to talk about this. So, on all action movies tropes episode, I actually brought this up because it's one of my favourite tropes, is that you always have to kill someone with your thighs. And she is upside down choking this guy with her ankles. There is no leverage on this at all. And he could have just walked away. It was... He willingly went down for that, man. And then obviously we get the 90s one-liner. So he goes, "Oh, give me a break." She goes, "Okay," and snaps his neck.
It's weird how nowadays you would call that kind of character a psychopath, but in the 90s they were a hero.
I was just getting into Pierce Brosnan, James Bond territory.
Nah, pretty much. Yeah, he's doing it for the greater good. Don't mind the hundreds of bodies that are just dead behind him. Going back to the action, though, it is okay. And this is the danger, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel as if this is the danger with ensemble films, especially with a film like Mortal Kombat, where you've got such a wide range of different characters, and you're trying to get quite a few of them in. Don't get me wrong, Sub-Zero and Scorpion, let's face it, and Reptile, technically, all three of them are just like a palette swap, and they don't really speak that much, at least in this film. But as you said, you've got Princess Katana, you've got Shang Tsung, you've got Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, you've got quite a few others as well. You've got a lot of people there. That is a lot to pack into a film that is, I think, an hour 40. I'm being generous here because it felt longer at times, but yeah, it's quite a dangerous thing to do, especially for that time, because as I said, this was the relative early days of video game films. And for the Mario Bros film, you had Mario, Luigi, Bowser, and technically you had Toad as well, and Peach and whatever, but
Yoshi.
Yeah, a dinosaur called Yoshi. Come on now. Come on now.
Canonically Yoshi.
Canonically. Canonized Yoshi. Punished Yoshi, if you will.
Biblically accurate Yoshi.
But yeah, then you had Street Fighter, which did exactly the same thing. It's like, oh, look at all these characters. It's, that running joke where you go to a restaurant and then the waiter's like, "Oh, do you want salt and pepper or cheese or whatever?" And they keep piling it on and you're like, no, that's enough. I said it's enough, but they just keep going. That's what it feels like. And I know obviously the film has a lot of problems, but do you feel as if that is one of the major problems, that there's just too many characters in this?
I don't really know, if I'm honest, because I'm trying to think if I'm watching it as not a fan. So, does it matter that's, you've got Scorpion and Sub-Zero and Reptile and stuff? I guess the question is what would the film look like without them? So would they have just had as many fight scenes, but with less characters? Because I feel like they didn't really explore any of the characters anyway. So, on the one hand, I actually do think it's an interesting flaw with all these films. I think that was quite an interesting point about they're trying to get these ensemble of characters into a linear narrative, which is quite a fun, interesting take. But I don't think have three main characters and three main villains is crazy overload for a film. X-Men got away with it. So I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a way of doing it. It's just this film wasn't it.
It's definitely not the worst example I've seen of an ensemble film. But you're completely right though. It doesn't deep dive into the characters, and obviously, especially in the 90s, I wasn't expecting a deep dive into why Liu Kang's bedroom's bright green.
And also the things that he owned in that bedroom was 2 shoes, a bike on the wall, and a single 8-kilogram dumbbell. It really blew my mind. On a dartboard, on the floor.
What a weird chap. Oh yeah, and his granddad's weird Western Union message where it's your brother's dead, come home. And that was it. You thought, wow, they really didn't beat around the bush there, did they? Just your brother's dead, come home. See, in hindsight, because obviously we are living in the year 2023 as we record this, we have the beauty of hindsight. Would you say this is the worst, if not one of the worst video game films you've seen? Or do you think it's not as bad as people make it out to be?
It's a difficult one because I guess it's what's your definition of worst. So it's probably one of the most boring ones I think we've watched. But then, like you said, it sticks pretty well to the films and people quite enjoy that. And It's difficult to say, because on the other hand, people will say things like, "Oh, the Super Mario Brothers movie is the worst video game adaptation," and I can see the argument because it's nothing like the games. But I actually think the film's okay in the sense of it would be, if it wasn't called the Mario Brothers movie, it would have been an average film. So I don't really know. I don't have an answer because it's definitely one I'm probably not going to watch again. And I'm not excited to look back to watch it. But then its objective was to make a film, sell a lot of film stuff, help the games by being like a video game, and it probably achieved that. If you listen to all the nostalgia about it, so it probably did its job. So I don't know. Where does your art lie on that? I guess the same question goes back to you. Where do you think it kind of ranks?
Yeah, it's one that I have to say, because I've not got as much nostalgia for the Mortal Kombat franchise, that I wouldn't go and rush back and watch this film. You know that way where you see a really good, bad film, you think, oh, I've got to rewatch this again. But for this one, yeah, it's bad. It's got some funny moments, funny one-liners. You've got that scene with Johnny Cage where he throws the autograph down the Scorpion after he slices his head open. Very brutal, but it's Mortal Kombat. But I wouldn't say it's the worst. See, going back and rewatching it, it's definitely not one of the best by any means of video game adaptations, but what I was surprised at was how much they took from the games, which I was really shocked by that, because I kept thinking to myself, how did they get so much and yet somehow stay so faithful for the most part? Because obviously there's some liberties that have been taken and such, but for the most part they did a good job for what they had at the time. And saying all honesty, I think they did a fantastic job with what they were given. But at the same time, yeah, it's not one I would go back and watch. What I will say though is one thing I did notice, and I don't know if you noticed this as well, was how, I suppose, cavalier they were with the theme song.
This made me laugh because it's very much that James Bond thing of like, when you know something's going right, you just drop the theme. But they did that in this film like 4 times because that theme is so good. It was like, another fight scene, drop the theme song, let's throw it in again. They were all over the film with that theme song.
Because it's something you don't really see, especially nowadays, as much with video game films. They don't have not a need, but they don't have an interest in putting in the video game music. Maybe they do it as like a mix. They mix it in with their soundtrack almost, but that's really all they do. They don't put in the theme song right away. But with this film, you're right, they threw it in at the beginning, which I was really surprised at. It was just getting yelled at, Mortal Kombat, and they just kept using it whenever the good guys fought the bad guys. And then they did that thing at the very end, of course, where they sequel baited. But the only difference between this sequel baiting and the Mario Brothers one was that they actually did get a sequel, and it somehow was even worse, apparently, because I don't even know if Mortal Kombat fans really like the sequel. I've heard they hate that, but somehow don't mind this one. So what a reputation this film has. But on that note, before we finish up, is there any final points you want to bring up for this? Or
I think I'll say what I say a lot of times we chat about bad movies, but this film is best enjoyed in a group and not on your own. Because I feel like we watched this. The reason I can't remember this film was because we probably spoke over all the boring bits.
or just yelled Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, I didn't say we were speaking sense, but
when do we ever speak sense? Not commentary.
But yeah, no, not a fan for this one. If you're going to watch it with a group of mates and have a laugh, I guess.
On that note, Craigy C, thank you so much for welcoming in the 4th season of Satsunami.
It's a pleasure to have been here, and congratulations on reaching season 4. I can't wait to listen to the rest of it.
Yeah, now you've only got 49 more episodes to go. So next week is Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
I'm actually busy forever.
You're not even sugarcoating that. So if you want to listen to more of our episodes, you can catch us over on our website, podpage.com/Chatsunami, as well as Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps. Just look for the Red Panda under the name Chatsunami, and we'll see you there. I also want to give a huge shout out to our Pandalorian patrons, Robotic Battle Toaster and Sonia. Sonia especially, thank you so much for recommending this topic. And if you want to hear Craigy C and I's commentary track tracks, not on this film, unfortunately, but on other films such as the Digimon film and Japanese Spider-Man. It was a fun time. You can catch us on patreon.com/Chatsunami. But until then, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly,
Mortal Kombat!
yeah, what he said. Welcome to Satsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series, Chatsunani, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe,
Stay awesome, and most importantly,
Stay hydrated.
Join me, Slade, and my two co-hosts
Joey and Tim
over at the Video Game Club, where once every 2 weeks we review a video game, not too dissimilar to a book club.
podcast.
You can you can find us at the Video Game Club on all good podcast providers and some sketchy ones as well.
This episode is sponsored by Zencastr. If you're a podcaster that records remotely like me, then you'll know how challenging it can be to create the podcast you've always wanted. That's where Zencastr comes in. Before I met Zencastr, I was but a naive podcaster, recording on low quality, one-track audio waves. But with Zencastr, you can kiss those fears goodbye as they provide crystal clear audio and HD video. Plus, with our all-in-one podcasting suite, recording with guests is extremely simple. From local recordings to post-production, Zencastr has it all. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code CHATSUNAMI. You'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experience I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.